Hey everybody, welcome to Dad's Den of Pop Culture. Today I'm taking a look at a couple action figures from the, I guess mid-80s you can kind of say. I guess it depends on how you divide your decades up. These are from a line from a company called Discovery for Children, or DFC. And they're part of the Dragonriders of the Styx line. Now, the Dragonriders of the Styx begins as a playset that they made a few different playsets. This was a fantasy one. It was essentially little plastic army men. Only these are fantasy figures. Warriors and wizards and various kinds of monsters. It was a very popular set. And like I said, they made a few other play sets as well. I actually had Pork Chop Hill, so that's like actual army men. And these sort of plastic vacuum-formed hills. A playmat, I think generally plastic, and some other pieces as well. You can see they had one called Dinosaurs and Cavemen, Invasion of Anzio, and Fort Courage. And they also did a few more fantasy versions of play sets as well. I got these two images from the Fantasy Toy Soldiers blog, and I'll put a link to the page in the description on this video. I suggest you go take a look at it because you have some really nice images of these boxes that they were producing at the time. And so we saw, the initial play sets in 1980. These particular toys come out in 84. So a little bit after, quite a ways after Star Wars figures, of course, and after the G.I. Joe, the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons figures from LJN, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. And you could look at these, they're somewhat generic in a way, but I actually think that makes them quite charming. This is the warrior, the barbarian here, is called Ragnar. Let's see if we can get, I don't know if we can get it to get a sharp enough look at him. But you got your bare-chested barbarian Ragnar. Now he would have originally come with a shield and a sword, which sadly I don't have. And then this is Wizard. No name, just Wizard. He would have come with a cape, which I think I can maybe reproduce for this particular figure, as well as a wand and a crystal ball. I got these at a really good price, and I kind of want to collect the action figures. There's not an awful lot of them. You also have Black Knight, Demon, Dragon Man, Guliz the Ogre, and a few more. Some of them and some of the vehicles are quite expensive at this point. Now you can see they're fairly solid construction, and they're not unlike the Star Wars figures of the period, except they do have bendable knees. So maybe that was for use with some of the vehicles. But you have otherwise you have the legs move, the arms move, and the head. It really doesn't move that much. At least that one doesn't. He moves a little bit better. Cool little figures. You can see scale-wise, not terribly different from old Warduke here. Here's a Super 7 Githyanki. Again, not too different. You could have played these. This is here's one of the adventure people, which they actually think are just about dead on with in terms of size. So you could have played with these figures. with a few other forms of figures. You know, some of the monster types probably could have and probably would, probably were used as aliens, you know, with Star Wars figures. Like I said, these came out in 1984, and there was this tremendous explosion in fantasy movies, books, comics in this period. I think we really see it beginning probably around the late 1960s. It's somewhat associated with the hippie period. It was in this period that The Lord of the Rings becomes a really big deal. I didn't realize how close in I was. And obviously, the fact that a lot of hippie types like The Lord of the Rings, not really very pleasing to J.R.R. Tolkien, who was not a big fan of the hippies. And I think he made an error there. There was probably some level of, well, we know there was some level of rebellion in that period. Rebellion against parents, rebellion against whatever. But I think there was also a broader search for meaning in a increasingly mechanical, computerized society, an increasingly materialistic society. I think, spiritually speaking, a lot of folks were having trouble, and I think a lot of churches, at least, especially I'm talking here more in the United States than anywhere else, the churches themselves had started to, I think, lose their own faith. They'd maybe become a little rote in their teachings, and I don't think they were connecting with people on a deeper level. And so you got, you know, kids leaving maybe the church they were born into, that they'd been raised in, and looking for other things. And I think that, you know, Tolkien, I think if he'd engaged with that generation, I think maybe he could have given them something higher and more virtuous in which to find meaning. Sadly, I mean, a lot of them went to, various ways, and sometimes spiritually, but I think a lot of them ended up falling for the illusion of meaning to be found in, you know, drugs and sleeping around and radical politics and what have you. And I think we're still seeing the impact of that to this day. But I think that kind of got things rolling, at least. You know, if the Tolkien books start selling, well, then the commercial interests are going to start looking for more that they could get out there. And in the same, you know, general period, maybe a little after, you start seeing reprints of the Conan stories, and then Conan imitators and Tolkien imitators, and you would have had C.S. Lewis's Narnia series out there as well. And then you see it in comic books. Obviously, Marvel did very well with Conan, Savage Sword of Conan, Red Sonja. And you would see imitators coming up from DC and from other companies. Often with some just very beautiful art. Barry Windsor-Smith, you know, kind of stuff. You get, I was looking at just from like 77 to about 83 in terms of fantasy movies. And let's move these guys over a little bit here. It's really a pretty amazing number of films that came out. You think nowadays about all the comic book movies that we're getting. You know, you got The Hobbit, you got Bakshi's Wizards, of course, Bakshi's Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. Again, so this is very late 70s, and you kind of see that with Tolkien maybe is kind of, again, the originator of some of this. Hawk the Slayer, though. Clash of the Titans. Dragonslayer. Excalibur. Heavy Metal. Time Bandits. There's Ator. That's obviously a French version of the poster. Miles O'Keefe. Sorceress. The Beastmaster. Oh, dude, that was an HBO movie. Man, did I watch that a bunch at my friend's house. Young enough that I was more impressed with the fighting and the little weasels than I was with oh geez, I can't think of the actress's name, but anyways, yeah, you know where you were young if that isn't the main thing you remember about the Beastmaster. Of course, Conan the Barbarian, and that would open the doors to a ton of Barbarian movies. But you also had the Dark Crystal, Flight of the Dragons, The Last Unicorn. What's that? Sword and the Sorcerer. Deathstalker. And there were several Deathstalker movies. Fire and Ice. There's the Lou Ferrigno Hercules movie, which is insane. Krull. Man, that was one that I wanted to watch so bad. I didn't get to, but I did have the comic adaptation of it. And there's Yor, which in the background almost looks like Darth Vader and Planet of the Apes and Battlestar Galactica getting all together. So you just had this massive number of movies, and you'd continue to get them for a few more years, although they start veering more and more into B-movie territory. And I think by the late 80s is when you finally see that trend running out. Ninjas start becoming a bigger craze. But really, that fantasy phase, that fantasy craze in the United States it's really interesting, and I think it does. I think initially speaks maybe to, like I said, a search for meaning, and then maybe later becomes a little bit more about barbarian babes in fur bikinis and ridiculous violence, but. I think it started with maybe something a little bit more meaningful than that. But then all of a sudden, it was gone, and Generation X was ultimately just left with its memories of that period, and a few keepsakes like these little figures here, like old Warduke from the D&D series, and some of those figures. And I don't know that we'll ever quite see the like of it again. We obviously got some really spectacular Lord of the Rings films some years back, and we've seen some other properties being adapted, but it's not quite the same as those afternoon matinee Barbarian movies that would pop up on HBO and Thundar the Barbarian, and I don't think you have kids running around with garbage can lids and makeshift wooden swords going nuts these days. You didn't quite get there from the Lord of the Rings movies. I don't think we're going to see that kind of a craze again. Maybe in a few years though. As the comic book movies wind down, maybe we'll get back to some bodacious barbarian fun. In the meantime, folks, what are your memories of the 80s fantasy craze, or I guess 70s and 80s fantasy craze? Did you have any of these Dragonriders or the Styx figures? Did you have the playsets? If you did, you are a lucky duck. What were some of your favorite things about it? And maybe you got some favorite Barbarian movies you want to talk about in the comments. I would love to hear it. If you enjoyed this video, please hit like. Maybe consider subscribing and sharing with a friend who might have similar interests in this period and this subject. I would greatly appreciate it. In the meantime, God bless everybody. Please be kind to one another and try to have some fun out there. And I will see you again later in Dad's Den of Pop Culture. Bye-bye.